My pets. Gwen Tennyson has a boyfriend. The least I can do is steal something important to her.
There's always been a pseudo-connection with UAF and DC and Marvel Comics, as they share most of the same crew that worked on these projects. Similar themes, art style, and character design, and Charmcaster is a very prominent example. When Dwayne & Co. took over Ben 10, she was translated into a sorta Enchantress/Scarlet Witch homage, which has a lot of pros and cons. She's a bit more cunning, but now is dominated by a more sensually hedonistic personality. Through this season, we see Kevin's internal and external emotional struggles with his condition, and this episode is a great example of that. This is the first time we see Gwen and Kevin have an actual fight as a couple, which pushes him into the alluring arms of Charmcaster. Although there's too much randomness in this episode for the plot to feel solid. It solidifies that magic is indeed real in Ben 10, which proves what the characters used to believe wrong. Although it would have been nice to have some in-universe commentary on that, rather than immediately confirming the existence of magic after spending 2 seasons saying otherwise. Gwen even starts casting spells out of nowhere, as if she's been doing it the whole time. It's also strange how breaking the charm is what frees Kevin of the spell, even though the charm wasn't what caused it in the first place, and how Kevin was able to contact Charmcaster later in the episode has zero explanation. Gwen also regains her powers almost as quickly as she loses them, so there's not enough time for it to feel like it actually mattered. Charmcaster's immense control over magic seems to only exist in this episode, such as charming her rock monsters against Gwen's mana, and her ability to control Gwen as she's made of magic. You'd think this would be relevant in all future appearances, but it isn't, and something this significant should be. Outside of the trio, Charmcaster is a less likable person than she was in Classic, and more of a typical villain of the week, which is in no small part to her character overhaul. While the main trio really excels in their new dynamic here, Ben's arrogance once again is more prevalent in this episode than it has been the past 2, but unlike the start of the season, it doesn't consume his entire personality. This episode mainly focuses on Kevin, which is a great change of pace, and I feel like he really shines in this episode. He seems to be taking this mutation hard, which is good development for his character. The temptations of straying from his heel face turn is portrayed much better than it was in Simple. It's also hilarious that Kevin's urge to crack jokes is still prevalent when he's being brainwashed.
Don't tell her, you simpleton!
Hey, give me a break, my mind's a blank.
The ending scene between Kevin and Ben really stuck with me when I first watched this, and I love that it ends on a sour but emotional note.
She's spending every spare moment going through every magic book she can find to try and help you.
She never told me.
Should she have had to?
It gave us our first real battle between Ben and Kevin ever since the pilot, but it's less than spectacular. The magic scenes were alright, but far and few between, and after some pretty solid looking episodes, this one does take a small dip in quality. Although there's a lot of love people have for Upchuck vs. Mr. Smoothie, and I can't ignore that. While this story introduces a lot of mainstay elements for the next 3 series, and delves further into Gwen's relationship, it does all but solidify itself in the overall narrative of Ben 10, but it's still a notable watch. This episode's entertainment mainly comes from the interest of magic and Charmcaster's return, and while I'm a fan of playing with the Gwen dynamic, it's not the best selling point for this episode, despite how much time it takes up. In the end, it suffers from the typical ideas versus execution problem Ben 10 has, and although it's not horrible, it's just very mid-tier.
Your problem is that magic is the only thing you're about. But for me, magic is only one aspect of who I am.